Welcome to CBN News. Dan Andros here, CBN News managing editor, joined by chief political analyst for CBN, David Brody. David, we've got some breaking news here. The president, and we'll zip it as soon as he goes live, and we'll take that and we'll talk after. But he's expected any minute now to address the nation. And this is in the wake as there's been some viral posts this afternoon talking about the 25th Amendment. And this is after special counsel Robert Hur's report released today. Didn't charge Joe Biden with a crime, but it painted a picture of a forgetful commander-in-chief. This is the CNN report, who failed to properly protect highly sensitive classified information. This is the part that has everybody talking right now, and likely what he's responding to tonight. It says, yet in a politically damaging line of reasoning, Hur wrote that one reason Biden wasn't going to be prosecuted was because he would present to a jury as an elderly man with poor memory. Biden's lawyers objected to the description, calling it investigative excess, and accused Hur of flouting justice. So that's what we have, David. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, there's a couple things, and also inside that report, and it was extremely damning. I mean, it was really, really bad. Also inside that report, wasn't quite sure when he was no longer vice president. That was in the report. This is from Robert Hur. Also in that report, he wasn't quite sure of when his son, Beau Biden, died. So look,
and that wasn't even within a couple of days or whatever. He was off years. He didn't know.
He didn't know any of this. Let me just, I'm looking this Biden now. I'm told, looks like we're going to, do we have him? It looks like
let's take it. It looks like he's speaking now. We'll be on a couple second delay here because we're getting the feed on the internet, but here he comes. We'll step aside here and we'll come back after he's done speaking.
Let me say a few things before I take your questions. As you know, the special counsel released his findings today about their look into my handling of classified documents. I was pleased to see he reached a firm conclusion that no charges should be brought against me in this case. This was an exhaustive investigation going back more than 40 years. Even into the 1970s when I was still a new United States Senator. The special counsel acknowledged I cooperated completely. I did not throw up any roadblocks. I sought no delays. In fact, I was so determined to give the special counsel what he needed, I went forward with a 5-hour in-person interview over 2 days on October the 8th and 9th of last year, even though Israel had just been attacked by Hamas on the 7th and I was very occupied. It was in the middle of handling an international crisis. I was especially pleased to see special counsel make clear the stark distinction and difference between this case and Mr. Trump's case. The special counsel wrote, and I quote, several material distinctions between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's are clear, continuing to quote, most notably, after given multiple chances to return classified documents to avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it. In contrast, he went on to say Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his home, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation, end of quote. I've seen the headlines since the report was released about my willful retention of documents. These assertions are not only misleading, they're just plain wrong. On page 215, if you had a chance, I know it's a thick document. On page 215, the report of the special counsel found the exact opposite. Here's what he wrote. There is in fact a shortage of evidence that I willfully retained classified materials related to Afghanistan. On page 12, the special counsel also wrote, for in other documents, the decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward. The evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents. The evidence said I did not willfully retain these documents. In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of Every Memorial Day we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or passed away. Simple truth is I sat for a 5-hour interview over 2 days of events going back 40 years. At the same time I was managing an international crisis, their task was to make a decision about whether to move forward with charges in this case. That's their decision to make. That's the counsel's decision to make. That's his job. And they decided not to move forward. For any extraneous commentary, they don't know what they're talking about. It has no place in this report. The bottom line is the matter is now closed. I'm going to continue what I've always focused on, my job of being President of the United States of America. Now, thank you, and I'll take some questions.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally out.
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr.
No, look,
President?
my memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Mr. President.
If voters have concerns about your age, how are you going to assuage them? And do you fear that this report is only going to fuel further concerns about your age?
Only by some of you.
Mr.
You were cleared of criminal liability today. Do you take responsibility for at least being careless with classified material?
I take responsibility for not having seen exactly what my staff was doing. It goes in and points out things that appeared in my garage, things that came out of my home, things that were moved not by me but my staff.
Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, "Watch me." Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
They express concerns about your mental acuity. They say that you are too old. Mr. President, in December, you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer to that question?
Because I'm the most qualified person in this country to be President of the United States and finish the job I started.
Do you believe that? Why are you confusing the names of world leaders?
I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter?
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not. What the
counsel said?
well, no, he did not say that. He did not say that.
Mr. President,
Well, let me answer your question. The fact of the matter is, what I didn't want repeated, I didn't want him to know, and I didn't read it to him, was I had written a long memorandum to President Obama why we should not be in Afghanistan, and I was multiple pages. And so what I was referring to, I said classified. I should have said it should be private because it was a contact between the president and the vice president as to what was going on. That's what he was referring to. It was not classified information in that document. That was not classified.
When you look back at this incident, is there anything you would do differently now? And do you think that a special prosecutor should have been appointed in the first place in both of these cases?
First of all, what I would have done is oversee the transfer of the material that was in my office, in my offices. I should have done that. If I go back, I didn't have the responsibility to do that. That was my staff was supposed to do that, and they referenced that in the report. And my staff did not do it in a way that, for example, I didn't know how half the boxes got in my garage until I found out staff gathered them up, put them together, and took them to the garage in my home. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. It was in my house. It wasn't out in like in Mar-a-Lago, in a public place and none of it was high classified. Didn't have any of that red stuff on it. You know what I mean? Around the corners, none of that. And so I wish I had paid more attention to how the documents were being moved and where. I thought they were being moved to the archives. I thought all of it was being moved. That's what I thought. Now, what was the last part of your question?
Whether a special counsel should have been appointed in this case and in the case of your rival, former president.
I think a special counsel should have been appointed. And the reason I think a special counsel should have been appointed is because I did not want to be in a position that they looked at Trump and weren't going to look at me, just like they looked at the vice president. And the fact is they made a firm conclusion. I did not break the law, period. Thank you all very, very much.
Netanyahu says that he has ordered the IDF.
Hostage negotiation. Look, I'm sorry. I'm of the view, as you know, that the conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. There are a lot of innocent people who are starving, a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying, and it's got to stop, number one. Number two, I was also in a position that I'm the guy that made the case that we have to do much more to increase the amount of material going in, including fuel, including other items. I've been on the phone with the Qataris, I've been on the phone with the Egyptians, I've been on the phone with the Saudis to get as much aid as we possibly can into Gaza. There are innocent people, innocent women and children who are also in badly in need of help. And so that's what we're pushing. And I'm pushing very hard now to deal with this hostage ceasefire because, as I've been working tirelessly in this deal. How can I say this without revealing it? To lead to a sustained pause in the fighting, in the actions taking place in the Gaza Strip. And because I think if we can get the delay for that, the initial delay, I think that we would be able to extend that so that we could increase the prospect that this fighting in Gaza changes. There's also negotiations. You may recall, in the very beginning, right before Hamas attacked, I was in contact with the Saudis and others to work out a deal where they would recognize Israel's right to exist, make them part of the Middle East, recognize them fully in return for certain things that the United States would commit to do. And the commitment that we were proposing to do related to two items. I'm not going to go in detail, but one of them was to deal with the protection against their arch enemy to the northwest, northeast, I should say. The second one, by providing ammunition and material for them to defend themselves. Coincidentally, that's the time frame when this broke out. I have no proof what I'm about to say, but it's not unreasonable to suspect that the Hamas understood what was about to take place and wanted to break it up before it happened.
All right, there you have it. The President of the United States, Crutch. Okay, I was hearing myself back, but I'm good now. Yeah, the President of the United States addressing the country, and David covered some ground there. It was very interesting to see. He tried to tout that this was basically a vindication of how he handled these documents, saying that no charges should be filed. He said he cooperated completely. I know. Interesting that he tried to compare it to how Trump handled it. Then he took questions and the press was firing away at him. So what was your reaction to that, David?
Well, there's so much to unpack here. First of all, let's put a point of clarification on a night that he's trying to clear up anything about any problems with his mental health. He went ahead and called the president of Egypt, President Sisi. He said he was the president of Mexico.
Yeah.
That's problematic, to say the least, and not the best night for a faux pas, if you will. And let's be honest, it's not even a gaffe at this point. It's not a faux pas. We're talking about a mental health condition. I think it's pretty clear. I'm not a doctor, but listen, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. Look, there's so much. Let's start with this. Around, 1 o'clock, 2 p.m. today or so, we started getting word officially of the DOJ report. Within 6 hours, President Biden is at a microphone holding a press conference in front of the country. That is significant because the White House clearly knows you don't hold a press conference 6 hours after a major report like this if you're not concerned about doing some damage control. And there's a lot of damage in that report. Yeah. And that's exactly why he was speaking tonight, Dan.
Well, let me just add something to give more context to what you're saying there, David. We're living in a time now, even more so than when he was vice president and even when Trump was president. You can survive news cycles on almost anything now. You can just let something go and the next wave of things comes across everybody's feeds and they forget about it, right? And it's just gone. And so the fact that he felt the need, as you're saying, to come out and address this just hours later shows that they really feel this is incredibly damaging. I mean, this is his own DOJ they're saying things like this. Yeah. And so they must view this as very damaging.
Well, here's a couple things going on here. First of all, and I want to get to the DOJ in a moment, but let's start with the press. I mean, the press was just fully after him tonight on the mental health issue specifically. They have never been this rabid. I mean, look, I've been calling as an analyst from an analysis standpoint, saying, where are the mental health records? Where is the deep dive by the media? Tonight, we're finally starting to see the media actually take this seriously because the DOJ, his own DOJ, came out with this scathing report. It's actually worse than scathing. So the media is turning on Joe Biden. That is bad news for Joe Biden. Here's the worst news, actually, beyond that. The fact that the DOJ actually came out with this report, it comes on the heels of people like David Axelrod and some other Democrats having concerns out loud about Joe Biden. Remember, this started as a nothing burger a few years ago. Then it became a whisper campaign. Now it's David Axelrod and the DOJ. Do you see the progression, Dan? I mean, it's to the point where Democrats are literally going to have to hold one of those reality show interventions. And I think we're seeing it play out in real time in real news. I think that's exactly, Dan, if I could just kind of button this up real quick and make the final point, which because of all of this, this is my conclusion, and it's not conspiracy. It's not anything like that. If you see all of this going on in the last 3 months, especially Axelrod, the DOJ, this is clearly a pressure campaign by Democrats in Washington, his own DOJ, to go ahead and say that type of stuff in a report like that. I mean, you could make the argument that should not have been fully in the report. It had nothing to do with the legal. I mean, it had to a degree, it had some stuff to do with the case.
But it was extra. It was extra.
It was over the top. It was over the top. So my point is, where I think this is going is, I think ultimately Democrats are going to say no mas, that they're going to somehow get Biden to realize that he's got to somehow step aside for the good of the party, for the good of the country. And I think that's where this is going. I think that's where the story leads us here.
Very interesting. And I don't know who the reporter was that shouted it out, but did you catch the question? It was a female reporter, and she said, so I don't have the exact quote here, but she basically just said, you said that all these, we have so many good Democratic people that they all beat Trump. All of us could beat Trump. And she says, why then does it have to be you? It was honestly shocking, David, for me to see that level of heat coming from the press at this president. You just don't see that. And he tried to shake off Steve Ducey, which I don't think that played very well. He tried to make a crack about it in the middle of this where everyone's going, what is going on here? And he made a crack. So I'm not sure that played too well. And then he just got bombarded after that.
Here's the big problem is that in one of those answers to one of the questions by the press, got really angry and he said, "That's your opinion. That's your opinion." No, here's the problem. It's not just her or his or the media's opinion. Forget that for a second.
It's a legitimate question.
It's not only a legitimate question, Dan, but poll after poll has shown that Americans have real concerns. And if there's going to be a disconnect between what Biden thinks, if he's going to chalk it up to the press as being tough on him and that's their opinion, he's wrong. You lose when you disconnect with the people. And he has, at this point, disconnected with the people. He has basically said there's no problem here when there is a problem here. And if you're going to go that route, you're going to be in for a potential trouncing in November against Donald Trump. And that's the last thing Democrats want. And that's why I think they're going to do an intervention, because they do not want Trump to sniff the White House. And they know that Joe Biden could seriously not only lose to Trump, he could potentially lose in what would be a modern day landslide, which is not a landslide of Reagan proportions, but it could be a pretty significant landslide at this point, the way things are going.
Yeah, I mean, especially because, I mean, here's a guy who 4 years ago, just about now, beat Donald Trump, and he's the incumbent president, and you've got Trump with all of these legal issues happening. Whatever you think about them, it is a distraction. It's all this stuff that you would think would help the incumbent president, and yet he's still trailing and lagging and dangerously in some of these polls. The RCP average, which I look to, and I think it's one of the more solid ones to look at because it averages all these polls together, and he's often behind in that. And that's got to be alarming for Democrats, who I think they do believe that Trump is very beatable. They probably would rather have him because they can ignore the economy and all the things going on there and make it all about Trump. So I think tactically they think that's a good thing, but now they're seeing, like, wait a minute, I don't know if Biden can pull this off. And it sure looks like you said, the tide's certainly turned on him tonight.
Politics 101 it's all about enthusiasm, and winning elections, you have to get out the base. You have to have a base that's enthusiastic about your candidate. No Democrats are just not enthused. They're just not. And once again, don't take my word for it. Just go to Google, type in polls, Biden, Gen Z, and you'll see it. Gen Z is down. Hispanics are down. African Americans are down. Just down the list, it goes. Democrats are not enthusiastic about Joe Biden. So for the good of the country, many Democrats obviously are saying, Joe, don't do this. But he's going to do it. I mean, at this point, he's planning on doing it. A lot of people thought that he might make some big announcement tonight, maybe a potential even resignation, though I can't imagine that would have happened. But the point is that he did the exact opposite. He doubled down.
Yep. And
so by doubling down, I think there's going to be a doubling down effect of an intervention by Democrats.
What do you think? I mean, we talked about this, David, when we were talking earlier in one of our reactions to some of the primaries that were going on. We were discussing the Democrats and what their options are. We actually talked about this simmering disdain from the Democrats, a lot of them, about potentially having Joe Biden run again when they think there's other people. I mean, I've seen all these names floated out there. I've seen Gavin Newsom. I've seen Michelle Obama thrown out there as a name. What do you think, David, Democrats would do? Let's just, first of all, what does a fight look like if Biden wants to cling on to this and then the establishment Democrats want to boot him out of there? What does that fight look like? And what would be their path forward to putting someone else in at this late in the game, which is kind of late in the game now for a switch like that? I don't know that there's been a time in history, at least modern history, where we've had this sort of a situation.
So there's two things that could potentially happen here. First of all, the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, could literally rewrite the rules of the convention. They could do it. And how appropriate that it would be in Chicago, of all places, where hashtag 1968, and they had a few problems back then as well. So they could literally rewrite the rules to, in essence, force Biden out and bring a new candidate in. Now, that's pretty radical. What also could happen, and this might be a little bit more of the traditional play, and at this point, nothing's traditional, but what they could do is, remember, you've got super delegates that go to the convention unpledged. And so you have in the Democrat Party, you have a lot more super delegates than you do with the Republican Party. So you could have a bunch of in other words, Biden could win primary after primary and accumulate all the delegates, but many of them are super delegates.
And so those delegates go somewhere else then.
That when they get to the convention and the roll call is the roll call, those super delegates, that's right. I was going to say darn straight. Sorry, I was going a little street there, but that's right. They could say, you know what? No, we're not doing it. Gavin Newsom, come on down. You're the next contestant on the White House is right for Democrats. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, and that would just be a lot of behind-the-scenes establishment working they'd have to be swaying those and have some sort of campaign going on behind the scenes to persuade these super delegates to go ahead and then take that to somebody else. They'd have to rally against someone. And it's really interesting because I threw the name Michelle Obama out there, and you just know how favorable she is viewed by the left and by the establishment media. They very much love her and praise her constantly. So, and, Barack Obama is very favored on the left as well. So, I mean, all of those factors in play and they like the historical things. So first woman president, it would be the first gentleman in United States history. And so they'd have all these firsts. And so, I'm bringing all that up to say that even like someone like Michelle Obama, it seems like you probably have actually a good chance of rallying some of these super delegates.
Well, beyond a good chance, let's be clear. If Michelle Obama ever did take the plunge, she would most likely, I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but she'd most likely be the next president of the United States. And once again, these are Republicans that say to me privately, and some have said publicly, that they are absolutely fearful of Michelle Obama getting in the race. She could win. Big time, she could win. And Democrats would love to see that. Here's the problem. Michelle Obama doesn't want it. She's been very, very outward about this. I mean, she's done now a couple interviews saying absolutely not. Some of it has to do with, well, I won't get into all of that because that's some private stuff on her end as it relates to being a female in her age bracket. We'll just leave it there. But she just said that this is her talking. She's very concerned about this stage in her life not being the time to do it. And she has said, absolutely, I'm not going back to Washington and dealing with all of this type of stuff. So she's adamantly against it. But you're always against it until you're for it. So right. We'll see. We'll see about that.
David,
but I will say this, Gavin Newsom's the obvious play here, which is interesting because Gavin Newsom, while he might look like a president, he's got the hairspray, he's got the hair, he's got the whole 9 yards. But the problem for Gavin Newsom is this just in, they tried to recall him as governor in California. If that's your bench, you may be in a bit of trouble. So I'm not quite sure Gavin Newsom is the actual ticket to get the job done for Democrats, but Michelle Obama surely is.
Yeah. Now, David, a question here from the chat. I'm trying to monitor the chat here. It's going by pretty fast, but if you have a question for David, reasonable questions, please.
I'm here all night.
We're here all night. We got a few more minutes.
The veal is great.
But just put it in like big caps, like question or something like that. Then I'll be able to see it, and then I'll try to get those questions. But one I saw come through was about this 25th Amendment, because that was what was trending on X today, and so of course the 25th Amendment would be related to the health issues and being able to remove the president if there was significant health issues, and then instilling the vice president to take over and establish. So. Do you think, the question is, David, do you think there's any chance of 25th Amendment happening or impeaching Biden as well? I guess those are two separate, probably.
I think there's a chance. Let me be clear. I'm just speculating at this point. I have no independent, verifiable information. I will say this. It kind of gets back to my earlier point, that this has been a situation where there was a whisper campaign to get Biden out. Then it was Axelrod and some prominent Democrats. Now the DOJ report. What's the next step? The next step, indeed, could be a potential movement inside the White House. Well, I say inside the White House, inside the government official, within government official D.C., to go that route. So that, my guess is, will be the next storyline, and for sure will be discussed. Whether or not it's specifically happening at this hour, don't know, and I think it's a bit too early. Having said that, after what we saw tonight, and the fact that I guess the president of Egypt is now the president of Mexico. I mean, that was not the time for Biden tonight. Look, I think ultimately that will be discussed, but I think they're going to try to continue to give him some grace until the grace runs out.
All right. Well, David, any final thoughts here? I think we are gonna wrap this stream up here in just a moment. So any final thoughts on what we witnessed tonight?
Well, I just think it was a pivotal turning point in Biden's White House and Biden's run for re-election. And I really believe that it is not on an upward trajectory. It's on a downward trajectory. And I think at this point, it's really just a matter of time before Joe Biden gets out. And I want to be clear that I don't have any independent knowledge of that. But what I do have is about 35 years or so of experience, especially within politics and being on Capitol Hill and being on the White House and being around DC for a while to understand when the writing is on the wall. And I think the fact that he held a press conference tonight, 6 hours or so after the DOJ report came out, I think that tells you everything you need to know, that this White House is in scramble mode, they're in desperate mode, and tonight didn't do him any favors whatsoever.
All right, CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, thanks for being here, dropping everything, being here on a moment's notice, hopping into the telephone booth, as it were, back in the Superman days, and putting on your analyst hat and getting over here. Appreciate that, and appreciate you all in the chat. We will keep you posted with any other breaking news that might happen on this front. But appreciate you being here, David. Thank you. And
Thanks,
we'll
Dan.
see you all next time. God bless.
See everybody.